the Israelis are going to lose that public relations battle. At the end of the day, those organizations are going to continue. The European Union has already said that they are going to resume aid, financial aid to those organizations. I mean, you cannot cut off the organizations that report on human rights violations on any side.
Israeli military escalation against the Palestinian people is on rise, bombarding Gaza, storming the Palestinian cities and villages and refugee camps in the West Bank, killing innocent people, demolishing homes in occupied Jerusalem, building more colonial settlements with no attention from the United States administration, which pledged to work for peace in the region. American President Joe Biden visited East Jerusalem and Bethlehem and met with the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, but nothing changed on the ground. Why the U.S. is not serious about recognizing the rights of the Palestinian people and making peace in the region. To talk more about that, I have with me from the United States Palestinian American writer Dr. Bishara Bahbah, who was Al-Fajr's editor-in-chief in 1983 and 1984. Bishara Bahbah taught at Harvard University and was the Associate Director of its Middle East Institute. He is currently the Vice President of the U.S. Palestinian Council. Welcome to our program, Dr. Bishara.
Thank you, and good evening to everybody in Palestine.
You're welcome. Dr. Bishara, the American President Joe Biden's visit to Israel and Palestine contributed to no change on the ground, as Israel continued to bombard Gaza, killing more than 45 Palestinian citizens, storming the West Bank cities, villages, and refugee camps on nightly basis, and killing also children, youth, and elderly, shutting down 6 Palestinian human rights organizations here in Ramallah. Why this hibernation by the United States administration, though Biden pledged many times to make peace in the region?
Well, thank you very much for having me, first of all. And to answer your question, why is the United States not doing anything in terms of Israel's violations in the occupied territories as well as Gaza? Yeah. And the answer is simple. The Israel-Palestine conflict is no longer a priority in the United States. The day when Bush Jr. and Clinton would spend endless hours and days trying to negotiate or trying to bring the two parties to the table are far gone. Right now, the United States, represented by President Biden, whom I believe will be a one-term president. He will not run for re-election, given his health and given his age. President Biden, of course, has to worry about worries about other regional issues, particularly the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, which ultimately scared many countries in Europe. And Europe is the heartland of the United States in many ways. So it's an important frontier. So the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has caused a shortage of wheat in the world, and also has caused shortage of oil and gas in Western Europe, because many governments in Western Europe decided to boycott the purchasing of natural gas and oil from the Soviet Union. You also have the issue of in the Far East of China and Taiwan. So in reality, the Middle East is not an urgent matter for the United States to spend a lot of time on.
Yes, and Dr. Bishara, from your own perspective, of course, under which scenarios would the United States become actively involved in the Israel-Palestine conflict?
Unfortunately, the scenarios that I see the United States getting involved is if there is a major intifada in the occupied territories, or a major conflict between Hamas and Islamic Jihad and Israel. under any other scenario, I don't really see the United States getting involved. Now, keep in mind that when President Biden visited, he allocated maybe less than half a day to his meetings with the Palestinian leader Abbas and visiting the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. So that should tell you about the priorities. Now, uh, from my perspective, I felt that what the Biden administration was doing, it was trying to buy Palestinian goodwill by giving money to the hospitals in East Jerusalem, by resuming aid to Rafah. However, I mean, you cannot buy political rights. The Palestinians want political rights, want that is theirs. They do not want money. In fact, there is enough gas and oil off the coast of Gaza to make Palestine a very wealthy state. So, I mean, unfortunately, they came bearing dollars, but they did not. I mean, Biden was clear in that this is not a good time to start or to have both sides sit around a negotiated table. This was music to Israel's ears because that's exactly what they want. They don't want U.S. pressure. Now we see this settlement growth taking place, and the United States would not even make a statement to the effect that that settlements are growing or new settlements are being built, and that's very sad.
Yes, Israel has decided to close the six Palestinian human rights organizations here in Ramallah. And the international community rejected Israeli labeling of these organizations as terrorist organizations because they are working for monitoring the Israeli violations of the Palestinians' human rights and working all the time in the field of human rights. How do you see the stance of the State Department of the States when it comes to this issue in particular?
Closing down organizations that monitor human rights violations is a grave mistake. It's not a winning war for the Israelis. The Israelis are going to lose that public relations battle. At the end of the day, those organizations are going to continue. The European Union has already said that they are going to resume aid, financial aid to those organizations. I mean, you cannot cut off the organizations that report on human rights violations on any side, you know. So this is what is the question is, what is the United States going to do about it?
Yes.
Well, it might go to Israel and say, you know what, we have concluded that the evidence that you have given us is not sufficient to shut down those organizations. And that's exactly what the Israelis do. They provided the United States with what they called as evidence, and the United States responded by saying that's not enough to shut them down. At the end of the day, I believe that those organizations will be reopened and the funding will be restored, and Israel will back down because this is not a winning war for Israel.
Yes, Dr. Bishara, the American president, during his electoral campaign, he had the promise to reopen the PLO office in Washington, D.C. But until now, we see no sign of real intentions towards reopening the PLO office. What's your take on that?
Well, of course, we're talking about not only just the reopening of the PLO's office in Washington, but also about the reopening of the East Jerusalem U.S. consulate.
Yeah.
And in that regard, on one hand, the reopening of the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem requires the permission of the Israelis, believe it or not. Closing it down was not a big deal, but reopening it requires it, even if Israel is an occupier in East Jerusalem. Now, of course, can the United States put enough pressure on the on Israel to reopen the consulate? I would think so. Now, on the other hand, with regard to the reopening of the PLO offices, I mean, the PLO is constrained and restrained as far as its operations in the United States, meaning there are so many laws that are on the books against the PLO. It would take a year, maybe 2, maybe 3 years to take these laws and either reverse them, or the easy option has been usually to provide a presidential waiver, which is written into these laws. Now, I mean, I am not sure whether the PLO, whether the Palestinian Authority or the PLO wants to reopen the office on a waiver basis, meaning conditional. You know, as long as the president is providing the 6-month waiver, then the PLO office can be reopened. It's possible that the Palestinians are saying, listen, you come and deal with us. Our presidents meet with each other. We have excellent communications. We have security coordination. You provide us with aid. Yet you're not allowing us to open an office and get rid of those laws that are stacked against the Palestinians.
Yes, Dr. Bishara, of course, the United States is not the only party handling the Israeli-Palestinian issue. We also have other countries, mainly the EU, and we know the EU support for a peaceful solution. But all that we hear is statements. We don't see any action on the ground, like stopping trade with Israel, boycotting Israeli settlement products, and so on. Do you think that the United States is also behind the Europe's fatigue of dealing with the Israel-Palestine conflict politically and financially?
Financially, no. I mean, what is given to the Palestinians is not very much money compared to what Israel receives on an annual basis. Israel receives $3.8 billion annually in military aid, and this year it was promised an additional $500 million to replenish the Iron Dome missiles. So Israel is receiving $4.3 billion, and the Palestinians, all the aid that was promised to the Palestinians has not reached $500 million.
Yeah.
So in that regard, financially, it is not a burden, but politically, there is no willingness. There is tremendous fatigue, both in Europe and the entire world. We should know that as Palestinians. We cannot be at the spotlight all of our lives. Yes, we have a just cause, but at the same time, people are getting tired. Even Arab countries are getting tired. And I was just doing some research. Over the past 2 years, Arab countries have purchased $3 billion of Israeli armaments. What does that tell you? Mm-hmm. Normalization is there, whether we like it or not. Normalization is there. And they do it under the table. They do it without providing specifics, but it happens. So there is fatigue among Arabs, there is fatigue among Europeans, there is fatigue among the rest of the world, and there is fatigue among the Americans. Now, the ray of hope in the United States is that we have a progressive wing, particularly of the Democratic Party, that is pushing for a two-state solution and a resumption of the peace negotiation between Israel and the Palestinians. However, we are in the middle of elections. In November, there will be another set of elections that will determine the strength of that progressive wing that supports the Palestinians. We have made dents here in the United States in terms of popular support for the Palestinians, but we have a strong bloc of people who support Trump and his idiotic policies toward Palestine. And these people will be standing in front of us, stopping any type of normalization between the Palestinians and the Americans, and the resumption of talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Yes, Dr. Bishara, you talked about fatigue in the United States, in Europe, and also in the Arab world. So, and this is my final question for this interview. In light of this very gloomy picture that we have, the situation here is from bad to worse in terms of Israeli occupation practices on daily and nightly basis, storming villages, detention campaigns, confiscation of land, the siege on Gaza, separation of Jerusalem from the sphere of the Palestinian territory, all that. So in light of this picture, how are the Palestinians' options going forward?
What are our options?
Yeah.
First of all, Palestinians should stay where they are, meaning Palestinian emigration to other countries should cease, particularly among Christian Palestinians. Right now, as we all know, less than 1% of Palestinians in the West Bank and East Jerusalem are Christian, which is really sad. So we have to stop the immigration. We also have to fight Israel for stealing our residencies. For example, I have a Jerusalem ID that was frozen in 2009. You know, that essentially that the Israelis have sent me into exile. And fortunately for me, I'm an American, I have an American passport, so I have a place to go. Otherwise, I would have no place to go. And there are at least 20 to 30,000 Palestinians from East Jerusalem that have had the same experience. So we have to stay put on the ground. We have to, I don't believe that the divisions between the West Bank and Gaza are going to be resolved overnight. However, there cannot be two governments. President Abbas himself said that there cannot be two entities in Palestine. There cannot be two guns in Palestine. There has to be one, meaning the Hamas should stand down and allow the Palestinian Authority to enter Gaza so that there is one unified country. Now, if we switch to the Israeli side has been living for 5 years on temporary governments. So Lapid, the Israeli prime minister, does not have a mandate to deal with the peace talks. He only has a mandate to run the government until the next elections. So in Israel, it's an issue because you don't have a partner. I mean, we were always accused of not having a partner. I mean, Bibi Netanyahu would accuse the Palestinians of not having a Palestinian partner to negotiate with. And now we're looking at the Israelis and we see that we don't have a partner to negotiate with the Israelis. Where are the Israelis? They're hopping from one election to the other. And it seems like the world stops whenever there is an Israeli election. And that can't be the case because the world keeps going on. The Palestinian situation in the occupied territories keeps getting worse. And the world is getting tired of the issue of Palestine. And these are issues that we have to address in order to make some headway toward a resumption of peace talks. Otherwise, maybe within 5 years, maybe within 10 years, the place will explode, and then everybody will be interested in peace negotiations.
Palestinian American writer Dr. Bishara Bahbah, it has been a great pleasure having you on our program. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. And from you, Salman Azal, wish you a nice time.